So you're looking to pick some winners this week at the Memorial. You've come to the right place. It's a superstar course, but there's more to it. Coming up on Key Stats, we're looking at the most important data for why winners were so successful here to help you make your picks. The course at Muirfield Village, very interesting on the back nine. Why you could take advantage of that. In the old debate of history versus form, does current form matter? Does recent history matter? Let's start with this, Will Gray. Are you picking a guy who loves tough conditions? Think about Muirfield, the fourth hardest course on tour last year. That included all the major championships.
You know, you take those out, and it's basically one of the hardest courses on tour last year in terms of just raw average to par score. So, you know, we run through the recent winners, and it's a lot of guys that you would expect to be there. Ball striking is going to be paramount. Of course, Scotty Scheffler scooped this trophy last year in the midst of scooping every trophy in sight for about a 4-month stretch. But you go back to Horschel and Hovland and Patrick Cantlay, and it's all these guys that you would expect to be winning an A-list event. Yes, we've seen some random ones. I was there when David Lingmerth took down Justin Rose 10 years ago at Muirfield Village. It can happen here, but by and large, this is going to be a top-tier pedigree winner this week.
Let's just get the elephant out of the room first. With Scheffler last year, and how incredible he was. No matter what stat we talk about, you can throw him out because of what he has been as a golfer. However, you're going to see some of these stats that we're going to look at. He kind of complements a lot of the data that we found. Again, this is Key Stats, how we pick our winners each week on tour. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube for all the great nuggets each week here on the PGA Tour. Our first big key stat, Will, it's strokes gained off the tee. Because 4 of the last 5 winners here since 2020, they were all inside the top 10 in strokes gained off the tee. Scheffler is the only anomaly, but look at every other player who won since 2020 and how well they did. What does that mean to the viewers, strokes gained off the tee?
I mean, this is a course where you need the complete package. Muirfield Village is one of my favorite courses on tour. I think it stands out in terms of the difference when you're there on site versus what you see on TV. Every year you're going to have thick, lush, rough, and a lot, as we see here, a lot of tree-lined fairways, some dog legs where you can just really get in trouble. That if you miss off the tee, you're going to have a tough time hitting the green, let alone getting it in the right section of the green to be able to take advantage and potentially make a birdie. There are a lot of characteristics that are very similar to Augusta National. This is a place where, in a lot of ways, Jack Nicklaus went and had some inspiration from the site of the Masters and trying to build out his own masterpiece. And there's a lot of parallels that you can see with how some of these holes are formed, but it's going to be a stern test tee to green. There's going to be an emphasis still on, what you can do with your irons. That's where Scotty Scheffler was able to separate last year, as he so often does, but it's not a place where you can stray significantly off the tee and expect to make it back up elsewhere. The par fives can be challenging. We saw this course get redesigned just a couple years ago, and the greens are continuing to grow in, and guys are getting used to some of the new length on some of those holes, especially I think of those 2 par fives in the back nine, 11 and 15. But Chris, this is not a place where you can fake it, especially off the tee.
So if you take our first big key stat, it also kind of complements our second key stat, and Will had already kind of hit on it, because if you're not hitting the ball great off the tee, hitting the ball into the green becomes even more difficult, because look at the hardest greens to hit on the PGA Tour in 2024 last year. Muirfield Village, number 1. Again, you've got major championship venues in Quail Hollow, which we saw last week at the PGA Championship, are right behind it.
There's a lot of elevated greens. It's not significant. I mean, the 18th hole is certainly a significant raise up, but there's just a lot of places where you can't run the ball up onto the green. Either it's a narrow mouth, there's a lot of bunkering, significant sand on and around the green. The 12th hole basically is like the 12th hole at Augusta. You either hit it or you don't. But when you think about guys that are trying to make it from out of position, you don't have a ton of options at Muirfield Village because the greens can slope significantly. There are a lot of tiers, but really I think in my mind of a few of those holes where there's just a big run up to make it that much more difficult to try and chase something up there, especially if you're trying to come in underneath some of the trees, get it to run up the green. It's a very difficult ask on a lot of these holes.
So on top of the fact that we did the math, it was the winners were hitting about 2 to 2.5 more greens per round than the average player. It was 68% to 57%, which is very big if you're talking per round basis. And then again, look at everybody here. Hovland's the anomaly. Greens in regulation percentage, the last 5 winners, Three guys were first, and John Rahm was third. And Hovland feel like he scrambled his mind off that week too.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the key to a lot of Victor Hovland wins is when his short game fires up, he's going to be tough to beat. But by and large, the blueprint to this course and victory here, as it is so often on some of the premier courses on the PGA Tour, is going to be tee to green. Yes, you can get hot with a putter. Yes, you can have a great week like Victor Hovland did scrambling. But for the most part, you need to hit 65, 70% of these greens. Give yourself a bunch of chances. Know that you're probably going to have a couple of three putts, right? These are not guaranteed two putts from a lot of places on these greens. It can get treacherous. Jack Nicklaus, as the tournament host, likes to dial up the speed. He wants this to essentially be a major championship caliber test as we head into the U.S. Open in 2 weeks. And that's what we've gotten used to seeing week in and week out, year in and year out at Jack's place. And I think this year is going to be no exception.
So we've gone through the difficulty of the course. Let's go through some of these specific nuggets about maybe how you should be adapting how you're going to make picks this week, because the back nine is where players have been scoring, where the winners have been scoring. Let's take 15 to 18 alone, for example. The winners played this stretch 1.5 strokes better than the field. You mentioned the par 5, 18's tough. You got a par 3 in there, 17's a beast of a par 4. When you think about those last 4 finishing holes, what do you think about?
Yeah, 15's the green light hole, the par 5. It's really your last great chance to put a number on the board and a circle on the scorecard. So you have to take advantage of that hole, at least birdie, potentially eagle, depending on how it's playing, if it's reachable. We've seen so much trouble on the 16th hole, guys trying to find ways to hit that green, hold that green as it's gone through the renovation. It's definitely one of the more demanding par 3s, and that water can come into play depending on where the pin is. You mentioned 17. It's like we're seeing all these tee boxes every year. It seems like they add another tee box and move that thing further back, and then you've got kind of a little bit of an awkward, approach shot over water. The water's not really in play, but then it is once again that really raised green. You see a lot of guys come up short in that rough as they're trying to get in there with a short iron, and then 18 is just a brutal hole. It's not one that I would look to want to play in the Pro-Am, let alone the 72nd hole with a tournament like this on the line. You don't have a lot of room to miss off the tee, and then you're trying to thread it around the bunkers. You got the creek running down the left. You're hitting to the clock tower for the second hole or second shot. It's just a demanding and difficult test, and one that is appropriate for the level and caliber of this event.
So here's the most and maybe interesting stat we have all week here on this. Back nine scoring and the strokes gained that the winners had compared to the field. These winners gained 65% of their strokes on the field on the back nine. Compare that to 35% on the front. I mean, what do you think gives their number one and number two, maybe more importantly? Are you going to look at players who have better stats on back nines this year?
Not necessarily. I think it's really the composition of the holes that we're talking about. It's 11 and 15 of the par fives. The 14th hole is a really fun hole. It became drivable during the tournament, the workday tournament that they had a couple years back during COVID. But for the most part, it just plays as a real risk reward short par 4. So I think, Chris, it's a little bit of they're getting the gettable holes a little bit more, but I really think a big key to that strokes gained stat is they're avoiding some of the mistakes on holes like 12, where you can easily make a double bogey if you're errant off the 12th tee. Same thing with 16. We're seeing here a flyover of the 18th green that you can find 6th without really trying that hard. So it's a little bit of maximizing your birdie opportunities, and it's a lot of avoiding the big numbers. And here on the 10th hole, as that kick starts the back nine, it's just a treacherous, run to the clubhouse.
Yeah, by the way, number 12 here, about 60 yards longer than the one at Augusta is. So that's just how difficult this place is. Yeah. It's straight downhill. That's everything about the course. That's the key stats that you need to look at. Let's look at the hot debate that everyone likes to look at. Your current form, recently leading up to how you're doing, and your course history. So we're going to look at 3 previous winners. Again, not Scotty Scheffler, because we feel like using him is pointless. Let's look at the guys who won this event and didn't win a whole lot of events around it. Here's what I find interesting. Both Victor Hovland and Patrick Cantlay ended up being FedEx Cup champions that year. Both of them went on to have career seasons. They are clearly in form. The blue section here that you see is their 5 events leading up before they won. You look at this, none of these 3 guys, including Horseshoe, really played great golf leading up. We got some second places here, but we have missed cuts. We have barely making cuts. Here's the caveat. Hovland was 3rd at the Players. We don't have that on here. Horschel was second at API. We don't have that on here. And Cantlay had a second at Pebble and a third at American Express, or maybe vice versa, and also did pretty good at Genesis. So in general, these players are playing well, maybe not necessarily right before they play this course.
Yeah, I'm leaning much more towards course fit and how guys style their game, especially at this juncture of the season. We've got, two majors in the bag, another one's on deck. We're heading into the heart of the race for the FedEx Cup, and you either have it or you don't, right? At this point, it's hard to envision. There are some outliers, like we see there with Patrick Cantlay, where he basically kickstarted his run to the FedEx Cup with his win at Muirfield Village. But for the most part, you have to have shown a little bit of a flash at some point earlier in the year. And then you also have to have a game that's really compatible with the demands of Muirfield Village, because we've seen, by and large, the sort of players, I think back to Hideki Matsuyama got his first win here back in 2014. This is, when Matt Kuchar was in his prime, he won here. There's a style of player here. This is not a course that you can overpower, but this is one where you have to really pick your spots. And of course, Tiger Woods did it better than anyone else of knowing where to really hit the gas, where to also hit the brakes and just lay back and hit it to 30 feet, take your par and move on, because this is a course where if you try and overpower it, they're going to send you to the exits in a hurry.
All right, we have a lot of information just thrown at you in the last 12 to 13 minutes. Let's get after it, my friend.
We will. It's going to be a good week.